Good morning. Welcome to this celebration of the life of Bill Steenberg. It has been an honor to work with the Steenberg family on this service and to honor this man who gave so much to so many, including to this congregation. When someone that we love dies, we need time and spaces within which to wrestle with the new realities this presents. And some among us, when they leave, rend the fabric in a particular way, for they are of the fabric of life itself for us, essential to what we know to be good and reliable in life. Bill Steenberg was one of those for so many in his life, and so we come here with great gratitude for his life, for the family which he leaves as part of his legacy, and the friendships and our opportunity to be amid his presence in that way here today. No doubt, Bill, with his sunny nature, would want our thoughts to be primarily a celebration of the life he so enjoyed, while inviting us not to be afraid of the grief, which may also be our companion in this space, and that is natural and that is good. This is a space in which we can contemplate his life, a life well and long lived, in which he did much, achieved much, and formed so many connections that were sustaining to him, and the memory of which is sustaining to those he leaves behind. May we trust that this is a space big enough for laughter, reflection, for tears, and for celebrating the joy of life and of relationships which formed the basis of some of his greatest joys. Mostly through the words of those who knew and loved him best, we will celebrate him. This time belongs to life, to the life of Bill Steenberg. And it is our tradition to light a chalice from when we lose a member, and so we invite his grandchildren to come forward to do that. And now, Bill's son Bill will present our reading.
Good morning. A poem for Dad. We must go down to the sea again, to the lonely sea and the sky. And all I ask is a tall ship and the wind, the song to carry it. And the wheel kicks and the wind sings and white sails shake. In a gray mist on the sea's face, a gray dawn breaking. I must go down to the seas again, to the vagrant gypsy life, and to the gull's way and the whale's way, where the wind's like a whetted knife. And all I ask is a merry yarn from laughing fellow rover, and a quiet sleep and a sweet dream when the long trip's over.
It is now my great privilege to present an overview of Bill's life based on the memories of his two children who shared their time with me so generously. William Albert Steenberg was born to Hilda and Louis Steenberg on January 4th, 1924 in San Jose. The family moved to San Francisco when he was very small, so he identified as a San Franciscan, growing up on Santa Rosa Avenue. Because his parents worked, his grandmother, Peterson, took care of and helped raise the boys, and Bill was fortunate to have an older brother, Bob, whom he really admired and enjoyed. Childhood activities included fishing and playing with neighborhood friends, many of which he remained friends with for his entire life, which is quite an achievement in and of itself. Every year, the family would go to Capitola for a family vacation, a tradition which Bill would then later continue with his own family, when often his brother Bob would join them. And as a teen during the summer, his children recall, he told them he picked fruit in Los Gatos. Bill went to Balboa High, and throughout his life would enjoy finding other Balboa alumni and was proud to have been placed in their Hall of Merit. He was elected class president, elected with posters designed by his brother Bob, who was an artist, and you can see those posters in the Borton Hall after our service today during the reception. And he would always talk about how his brother encouraged him to run for that office. Bill went to San Francisco City College, where he met his future wife, Marilyn. The story that Sue and Bill told me was they met in the school bookstore, where he gave Marilyn a hot foot, which Bill and Sue explained to me involves something with a match inserted into a saddle shoe lit in secret. I think there should be more details about this revealed in the reception as well. Bill joined the Navy after college and was a pilot flying off of Japan as a torpedo bomber. After his plane was shot down, he was rescued by a submarine and spent the last several months of the war in that submarine. After the war, he returned to the San Francisco area where he was reunited with Marilyn. Bill went to Stanford and earned a degree in industrial engineering, which he completed in 1948. And Bill and Marilyn were married a few days before his graduation. Bill got his first job in Milwaukee, and they moved into an apartment with a sign that flashed into their apartment. Always the sign of a certain neighborhood, right? They moved to Terre Haute, Indiana, where Bill was born, and 3 years later, they returned to the Bay Area where baby Sue was born. Bill began work with Western Craft, which would become Western Corrugated and then Willamette Industries over the years he was there. Shortly after that, the family bought the house in Danville, from which Bill commuted to San Leandro. Bill's work involved helping build plants throughout the country in California, Oregon, Georgia, Kentucky, Ohio, Texas, and Washington State, where he oversaw the building of a packing plant. He also developed a method of waxing boxes that allowed them to carry produce. He formed lifelong friendships with his colleagues at work as well. While the children were still very young, Bill and Marilyn explored churches and ended up here at this congregation, which was this congregation's gain, as you'll hear later. He shared his love of sailing with his kids, which you'll also hear more about, and they sailed a lot as a family in the Bay and in the Delta and in Tomales Bay. The dams and the hills and the Steenbergs would gather for times which included, Sue and Bill recalled, nighttime sails and also Easter celebrations at Tomales Bay. Sue remembers being in part of this congregation in the Highland building and services at the Red Cross building, and Marilyn for a short time was the director of religious education. As you will hear, Bill was instrumental to the reciting of this congregation onto this beautiful campus, and Marilyn was on the board of trustees. And core to their bond to this place was with families such as the Pounds, the Hills, the Chases, and the Fujiokas. Marilyn would accompany Bill when he was building plants across the country. After Bill and Sue left the house, Bill retired for the first time at 65, and then he went back to work. When Marilyn was diagnosed with cancer, he retired for the second time so that he could be the kind and loving caregiver that he was until her death in 1996. Throughout his life, Bill was involved in volunteering and charitable work. After Marilyn's death, Bill and Sue said, he looked into overseas volunteer work. In his 70s, the Peace Corps said he was too old, but he didn't feel he was, so he ended up volunteering in Zimbabwe with a housing group for a year. As part of the group of 10 volunteers, he and Chris Stromso worked together, and the group coordinated it all. It was a sort of a Habitat for Humanity kind of construction, and during that time, he met Jimmy Carter as part of that. They built 2 houses. There were 2 houses where the volunteers were staying, and there were 5 people in each house. He was over 70 when he went, and all the others were in their mid-20s, so he had a wonderful time and stayed close with all the volunteers. Sue recalls that he was aware that at the beginning, the younger people were not quite sure they wanted to be the roommate with a man in his 70s. But by the end, she said, within a month, one of them said, I knew we were the lucky ones. When he was ready to come back, Bill decided to sail back and went to Cape Town and hung out at the docks and put up a sign to be crew on a boat, and then they sailed from Cape Town to Brazil and then up to New York, a multiple-month trip. They had such a good time that the skipper asked him to do another trip from Portugal across the Atlantic and up the coast. And remember, he was about in his mid-70s at this time. He enjoyed time with friends and family and in La Selva Beach, where Marilyn and Bill had planned to retire before Marilyn fell ill. It was a family gathering spot that they had gathered for years with many, many family members packed in a small space. He took multiple trips to the Caribbean with both Sue and Bill, the Virgin Islands, and other sailing, which you'll hear more about from Bill. He also swam at home regularly during the summers. When he was in his 60s, one of the men in his World War II squadron reached out to all the members of the squadron, and they began to have a reunion every 5 years. And then they had one every year until there were only 4 of them left. Later in life, Bill became close once again with Gwen Langosh, who had been a dear friend and a wonderful part of the Steenberg family. As Sue wrote, she brought him much joy and partnership, though, Sue says, the dual heart attacks perhaps went a little too far. He loved her very much. Though a disagreement with the church led Bill to step away for many years, he returned in his last decade and always brought his enthusiastic smile to Sunday services and to our Elder Journey gatherings when he could be here. Other than some back problems, he rode his bike into his late 80s. He sold his second boat when he was 92. His first health issue serious was when he turned 90, and he did have his big celebration postponed by abdominal surgery. He continued to live in Danville until 2019, when heart issues and a stroke had slowed him down. After that, he moved into Brookdale Senior Community, a few miles away from Sue's home, and not surprisingly began to make friends there until, of course, the pandemic hit and everything closed down. After about a year, his memory loss worsened and the dementia started until he required full-time care. He remained positive and physically healthy, appreciating caregivers Mette and Gia and Nanny who helped make his days full. He also particularly loved having Gwen read the poem that Bill read earlier, which was a favorite of his. Bill died on January 31st of this year. As Sue wrote, Bill was ever optimistic, adventuresome, and full of good cheer to all he met. He treasured time with family and friends. He loved swimming in the ocean, riding his bike, traveling, visiting Yosemite, dining outdoors in the summer, and the beautiful peace, quiet, and community of La Selva Beach. He is dearly missed, but he is always remembered in his words, as he would often say, I am so lucky. We now have the great honor of hearing from Bill's family, Sue, from Bill, from Frank, and then the words of Gwen.
Oh, good morning, everyone. I'm Bill's daughter, Sue. I know most of you, and I'm so pleased to see you all here, and the family is so grateful. And with that, I thank you, God, for this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirits of trees, and a true blue dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. It's from a poem that's near to us, near and dear to us. And yes, it is an amazing morning. And if you were lucky enough to call Dad in the morning, I'm sure many of you did, you would get the great, "Good morning, how are you?" And if you were lucky enough to be around Dad in the morning, and particularly if you were one of us women, he'd tell you how beautiful you are. Even though you just got out of bed, your hair's a mess, but he meant it, he believed it. It was true. And if you were lucky enough to be with Dad in La Selva Beach in some of the earlier years, you remember that he would get up very early in the morning and walk to the bluff. He would greet the morning, see the ocean in all its beautiful early iterations, and then he'd walk back, he'd stop at El Patio, pick up a newspaper, get back to the house, and by the time everyone was up, the coffee would be brewing, the orange juice was made, the melon was cut, and he'd be ready to cook up some pancakes. A tradition. And it's a tradition that now, whether knowingly or not, the grandkids are following suit. And yes, he passed down many gifts to us, connections from one generation to the next. First and foremost, as Leslie's mentioned, his everlasting optimism and great good cheer. One friend described him when I talked with him on the phone as Dad was relentlessly cheerful. And I do like that description. He had an open heart, a welcoming family and friends. "Come on in, what can I get you?" And always telling me and reminding me that family and friends are the most important. We gotta stick together, he said to me. We gotta stick together. And not just family and friends, but giving cheerful greetings to strangers on the street or strangers at the store. It's just plain happy. And in an everyday kind of way, he and I would, when we were gonna have a family gathering, he and I would go to the grocery store, usually 2 different grocery stores. We had a list for this grocery store, a list for that grocery store. And he and I would go in, full cart in each place we went, and it was so much fun, because he would be saying hi to everybody. "How are you doing?" Someone would comment, "Gee, you have a lot of stuff in your cart." "Well, come on over and join us then." So, I miss those shopping trips. So optimism, good cheer, and gratitude. He was always on the sunny side, as the song went. "I'm so lucky," he would say. "Look at the beautiful produce when we're at the store. It's my great good fortune to be here." And I see legacies of that spirit also in this next generation. The optimism, I think, grew out of his deep faith in humankind and in the natural world around, grown from being in a very loving family with his parents, his grandmother, and his absolutely adored big brother, Bob. Progress is guaranteed, things will work out. And a quick aside, at one point, one of the grandchildren was supposed to interview someone about the Depression, to know what it was like to live through the Depression. And he said, "Well, actually, we had it pretty good. We all had it pretty good." The produce man came by in a horse-drawn cart, and Grandma Peterson would go out. She'd go out and flirt with him and get the best produce. So I think his report at school was probably a little different than some of the others. So that optimism and faith in humanity went hand in hand with his adventuresome and hardy spirit. And not just the big adventures, not just going and flying TBMs off off of the carrier USS Monterey in the Pacific, not just being shot down and rescued by a submarine, and not just 50 years later, traveling to Zimbabwe in his early 70s, as Leslie was describing, to join a group of volunteers, all the rest in their 20s, and he had a blast. I know that there were challenges, there were difficulties, but he loved the experience, and most importantly, he loved his fellow volunteers, some of whom are joining us today. And not just heading to Cape Town, walking the docks and putting up the sign, and then hitching a ride on a 40-foot sailboat with a captain and one young crewman. And captain was skeptical due to Dad's age and unfortunately one error in a knot early on in the trip. But Dad won him over, and as so often happened, they became lifelong friends. But it's also the smaller adventures, that some of which Leslie has mentioned, swimming in his chilly pool virtually every day from May to September, climbing down the rickety pool ladder through age 96, always declining any help, riding his bike as long as he could, sailing out in the bay into his 90s, leaning over the transom. Those of who have sailed with Dad, leans over the transom. Whatever, you're out in the bay, the water's rough, to start the pull motor. Again, declining any help. Harrowing for others to watch, but not to him. So those adventures, large and small, that hardiness, so essential to who he was, and I see that legacy also in the next generation. In spades, traveling, backpacking, climbing, rock climbing, rafting, working in challenging careers, raising Chris, hopping on a boat in Baja to sail to Tahiti, so what does that sound like? And then Summer, raising the stakes and heading to Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and other areas in or emerging from war or natural disasters. You can do it, was his message. Live life to the fullest. You got this. A legacy, an encouragement. So I see and I love the connections, a celebration of Dad's amazing life and a celebration of his amazing legacy. Yesterday afternoon, I laid down to take a little nap. The family was here in our rental house. Oh, and naps were also near and dear to Dad's heart. And I heard the family down the hall talking, laughing, a lot of conversations going on, very lively. And it was such a perfect reflection of Dad. That beautiful sound of love and joy. So I miss him terribly. His sweet smile, his cheerful greeting, his two-finger kiss, his insistence to step outside to wave when people left. You gotta be out on the front porch and wave till they drive away, all the way. The Steenberg tradition. But I know we'll always carry him in our hearts and in our lives. And I want to express my deepest gratitude, and I know Dad's too, to his beautiful caregivers who are here. They were so kind to him, so gentle. He trusted them entirely, adored them without hesitation. They took beautiful care of him and of us, and I'm so, so grateful. So one last comment, Dad's love of the water, sailing in the bay, crossing the sea, diving as he would straight into the waves in Capitola and then in La Selva Beach, walking at the edge of the water, gazing out to sea. That too is a gift that he gave us. So as you lead your lives, remember that love of water. Know that you are near Dad when you are near the ocean, the bay, even a lake or river, and think of his gratitude. I'm so lucky. And think of his everlasting optimism, good cheer, his friendship, and most of all, let his love surround you. Thank you.
Well, good morning and thank you for coming. I am Bill Steenberg, not Junior, different middle name, but I am a Steenberg. Dad did take us sailing all the time. He had the 18-footer, we would camp in it, the whole thing. he really enjoyed the sailing. And I enjoyed it. I think Sue enjoyed it. Mom was kind of funny. She stayed in the cabin all the time, but that's okay. Dad did love the beach. He loved his pool. And he loved the family. He had really great gatherings of the family. We all love each other very clearly because Dad loved us very clearly. I'm still trying to grow up to be like him because he was so generous and so kind and always happy. I never saw him sad. He was always happy, always smiling. As Sue said, giving a great good morning. And I don't know, it's hard for me to pull stuff out of my head to talk about Dad. He did. He gave his all. And I know that it's good that we are celebrating his life, and it's good that he had a good life, and he did really well. And I think that's as much as I can say, but thank you all for being here.
Hello! That is a greeting we heard whenever we came over to see Bill and came into his house, and he would greet us, hello! And we go, ah, and we all go, yay, and all that stuff. So he was kind of positive. So anyway, I met Bill in '74 when I met Sue at Santa Cruz, and we kind of hit it off right away. We had a common bond. We both flew aircraft in wars. He flew a torpedo bomber in World War II. I flew helicopters in Vietnam. And we had this common connection of aviation. We never talked much about it around the family, but when we got together at air shows and maybe walking together on the beach, we'd talk about it and look at the ocean and things. So, but anyway, he was, and I just came to love this guy. He's just like Mr. Positivity. Who didn't love him who met him? He had the ability to turn situations around. I have two examples here. Early on in our relationship, Sue invited me along on the family trip to Tamales Bay. And they'd hook up the boat on the back of the car, load everything in, and then head out to Inverness. And we'd stay at the Golden Hind, where all the people, the family would get together. We'd play cards and games, and I think there was alcohol involved sometimes. You know? And it was just great. So on this one trip out there, I had the boat hooked up in the back of the car, and we were heading out to Tamales, to Inverness, and we have a line of cars, and the light's red up in front of us, and then it turns green, and the cars move, and then all of a sudden, the light turns red, and we're stuck in the intersection, blocking the intersection, all directions, nobody can move, and I look over, I'm in the back seat, I look over at this guy over here, he beeps his horn, what are you doing? And I'm looking at him, and I think, this guy's gonna get angrier and angrier and beep his horn more. But all of a sudden, I look at him, and he's laughing. And I go, what the heck? And I look over at Bill, and he's like this. And the guy's going, yeah, okay, I know you screwed up, we screw up sometimes, blah, blah. I mean, that's going through his mind. So anyway, so went on and had a great time, of course. But then this other time was when for his 90th birthday, we were down at La Selva Beach, and everybody was going to come over, and he fell ill. And the paramedics came, and the ambulance, and took him off to Memorial Hospital, where he underwent an operation. So we came over to visit him, and this nurse came in. She had the worst attitude you ever want to see. I mean, she would, I didn't know how she could be a caregiver, you know. And so I'm thinking, oh, couldn't they get some nicer nurse for Bill, you know? And so we came back and to pick him up when he's ready to be discharged. And who's pushing the wheelchair with Bill in it but that nurse? She's like, they're talking and having a good time and joking, and then she gets him up on the, I forget name. Then she helps him up and gives him a big hug, and I'm going, what the heck happened here? And I realized that she was Billified. We're gonna miss him. He was a great guy, you know? Thank you very much.
I'm not Gwen Langosh. I'm her daughter, Debbie. And the words that I'm speaking today are mostly my mother's words. She wrote a eulogy for Bill, which she asked me to share with you because she didn't think she could get through without crying. And quite honestly, at this point, I'm not sure I can get through it without crying. But this is a place to cry. So this is from my mother. I have some personal credibility because I have been sailing with Bill Steenberg, so I know a little bit about what it's like. My family met Bill and his family 63 years ago at the Unitarian Church in Walnut Creek. Sue was 5, and I was 7. Billy was 8, we called him Billy then, and my brother Peter was 9. My mother thought he was the most optimistic person she had ever met, as you have heard, and as you well know, but also the most progressive liberal she had ever known. She saw him as the epitome of someone living life to the fullest every day, doing the things he loved with the people he loved. Some people thought Bill was tenacious, which he was. My mother thought he had a stubborn streak a mile wide, but it served him well in life. And for example, he spent 7 years courting Marilyn, trying to convince her to marry him. When he was in the Navy and he received letters from her, she would sign them, "Sincerely, Marilyn." And Bill said to my mom, "I wanted more than that." And as we know, their marriage lasted 48 years until her death in 1996. My mother has said that Bill did not deviate from his goals. He never considered that anything could possibly go wrong. But he told her that his years at Stanford after the war were the hardest years of his life. And nevertheless, he graduated from Stanford with a degree in industrial engineering and married Marilyn the next day, according to Gwen. The next day, which is pretty impressive. And he designed and built these enormous cardboard box factories, as you've heard. And apparently the first one he built was too small, but by the second one, he had gotten it right. And after Marilyn's death and Bill's retirement, he volunteered for World Vision to help people in Africa build their own homes, and where he met more lifelong friends. When the year was over, he wanted to sail back to the United States. That impresses me. He found a skipper in a sailboat, and they set out from Cape Town, South Africa, and after 4 months, and I'm sure many memorable adventures, they arrived safely in Patchogue, Long Island. Bill was 76 years old. And as with all Bill's friends, once you were his friend, you were his friend for life. And so it was with Skipper Eric. Bill's second volunteer job found him back in Africa, working with Habitat for Humanity, the brainchild of Jimmy Carter. And Bill said that on the plane flying home from Durban, South Africa, Jimmy Carter came through the cabin and personally thanked everyone for their work, their hard work, and their dedication. And Bill was honored, and he was especially honored because he thought Jimmy Carter was one of the best presidents we've ever had. So in their later years, after my father had passed away and my stepfather passed away, and when the weather was right, Bill and my mother would go sailing. He had a 25-foot sailboat. It handled like an unruly child. It really did. It was a difficult boat, but they had a lot of really fun times and a lot of happy memories, and that's where I sailed with Bill. One time, they were approached by the Coast Guard, who pulled alongside and told them to stop. Well, sailboats don't have brakes, and my mother was at the helm. So she turned the boat into the wind, Bill came up from below, and Gwen asked them if they wanted to board the boat. No, they just wanted to see the registration, which Bill had. And Bill asked them if they'd done anything wrong. And they said, no, we're safety check. And so again, after they left, they were satisfied they left. Bill turned to my mom and said, maybe they just needed to be certain that two old gray heads could still get out and sail. They were in their 90s. Well, Bill was in his 90s. My mom was in her late 80s at that time. My mother felt that you couldn't spend time with Bill and not catch some of his optimism, his joy of living, and his love of people. The more people, the better. And in those later years together, my mom spent many holidays with Bill and his family at their home in La Selva Beach. And she said it was always wall-to-wall people. And Bill always made sure you had a drink and cheese and crackers. One year they had 18 people at their 4th of July party in their beach house. More the merrier. My mother feels so lucky to have shared all these years with Bill and his family, as do I. They've been such an important part of her life that they have become a part of her. She feels they have made and continue to make her a better person, and she misses him every day. Scott?
Someone was supposed to sign with this, and I'm waiting for them to stand up and be recognized. There she is. I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and for you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright, blessed day, the dark, sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? they're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
We now have the opportunity to hear from David Stanley on behalf of the congregation, from Sean Gallagher, Claudia Steenberg, and I believe that Summer is going to share some excerpts from some of Bill's own words after that.
Man, you guys are a hard act to follow. Boy, the Bill that I knew was the Bill you described. Well, look out the window here. And I don't know, it's just coincidence. 60 years ago to this month, Bill Steenberg persuaded this congregation to buy this piece of property. It's thanks to Bill we have this place. I'll tell you more about it in a bit. My name's David Stanley, and I've been active in this church for the last over 30 years now. And I guess that qualifies me to say something about history. There are people, I can see several here, who knew Bill at the time that I'd be talking about. Deb and Rowena were part of that generation that Bill was, the founding generation of this church. I'm here to say something about what Bill and Marilyn meant to me and to our community. Bill and Marilyn were part of the founding generation of this fellowship and church during the post-war years in the 50s. Most have passed on now, but not all. Some leaving their names on various parts of the campus. Some are still with us. An inspiration of the loyalty and commitment that enabled this church to establish itself, to grow, and to persist in good times and bad. A voice for reason, justice, and compassion in our county, our part of the world. If anyone deserves to have his name attached to this property, it is Bill. For it was thanks to his leadership and efforts that we came to be established here, and to build our first church and church buildings across the way here, and eventually to build this sanctuary, this beautiful sanctuary here 30 years later. The founding members formed a fellowship that met in rented rooms in Walnut Creek. They grew along with the city and county and decided that they wanted to establish a permanent church. Bill led the small team that was charged with finding a location, and in April 1963, 60 years ago, identified this place. It wasn't easy. I was looking at the history. It took them 2 years. They looked at over 100 properties. They had to persuade, this was a piece of just open farmland. They had to persuade the neighbors and the planning commission that it was suitable to build a church on. They had to go through the building a road, building the sewer connections, selecting an architect, working with the architect to design and build these properties. And Bill was instrumental in all of that. Same time, he was raising a young family. I don't know if we could do it. We could do it now, but that's what he did. I want to say on a, make sure I got this. 30 years later, we needed to build a new sanctuary. Our church was growing. And we made a decision that was very, very painful to Bill and Marilyn at the time, and I remember it well. This is when I was here, to sell part of our land, the land that Bill had acquired, to be able to raise the money to build this place. And I know that was very painful to him, and it was very painful to me and my wife at the time to see that rift that caused for a while. I would say on a personal note, my wife and Sandy and I had joined the church in 1991. The following year, Marilyn was the president. And I remember well her calm and modest leadership of this church. And my wife at the time we needed money, she started a decorating business, and Bill and Marilyn were among her first customers. And they formed, as I hear everybody who met Bill, formed a friendship. And she can't be here today, but Bill and Marilyn were very dear to her. Later, we got the opportunity with our family to use the La Selva Beach home and enjoyed that time there too. We also, my wife's from San Jose and also love Santa Cruz and Capitola. I'll miss seeing Bill with his wonderful opening smile. It was a great personal gratitude to me to see him coming back to the church with Gwen in the last 10 or 15 years. And he was, I'm repeating what you said, he was the epitome of the optimistic, open-hearted, steadfast, and productive generation that the founding members of this church and the builders of this country after the Depression and war years, and my own parents. And it's a hard act for me to follow, and it's a hard act for our generation to follow. I want to leave on a lighter note. I love that poem, but I know a different version of it that Bill read. I must go down to the sea again, to the lonely sea and sky. I left my shoes and socks there. I wonder if they're dry.
Hi, I'm Sean. I'm one of Bill's grandkids. My grandpa lived an incredible life, and we're all extremely lucky to have been a part of it. Grandpa did so many amazing things throughout his life, but like everybody else, I want to talk about his pure, genuine kindness. Grandpa was probably the most optimistic and happy person I've ever met, and likely ever will. Not only was he happy and optimistic, but his cheer was contagious. When he was around, you couldn't help but smile. It didn't matter if you were a close friend or family or a stranger in the grocery store. Grandpa would always greet you with a big smile on his face. And when you were talking with him, he was always fully engaged. Grandpa totally embodied the phrase, "the more the merrier." There was always room at the table for everyone. And if the table wasn't big enough, well, we would just grab another table and put it on the end. Everyone was always welcome and made to feel like part of the family. And every day with Grandpa was a beautiful day. I don't think I ever heard him say a day was anything other than beautiful or wonderful or great. It didn't matter if it was bright and sunny or torrential downpour. It was beautiful. He had such an amazing way of seeing the positive in everything. That eternal positivity inspires me every day and will be something I carry with me and do my best to emulate. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Claudia Steenberg. I'm Uncle Bill's niece. Uncle Bill was my father's brother. He was 6 years younger than my father, and he adored and looked up to my father. He often asked for his assistance, such as helping him design posters when Uncle Bill ran for office in high school at Balboa. And some of those posters are in the lobby where we came in. I was amazed to see them. I had never seen them before. And I could see my father's hand in all of that work. Uncle Bill, as everyone has said, was an optimist. He always looked on the bright side of things. I don't remember ever having a day when he didn't see everything was wonderful. He loved his entire family, and he always welcomed in and accepted new additions. He enthusiastically welcomed Celine into our family, and he made a comment to me that she was a beautiful child. He supported and encouraged her enthusiasms and her interests. I know they were very close. He and my dad enlisted in World War II. Uncle Bill joined the Navy as a pilot, and he was proud of his service. I remember him saying that to me. He and my father were raised by the same parents, Louis and Hilda Steenberg, and they enjoyed the unconditional love of their grandmother, Josephine Peterson. My dad always said there were never any conditions on her affection toward Bill or my father. He loved his beautiful wife, Marilyn, and said that his marriage to her was the happiest day of his life. As a teenager, I remember him enthusiastically dancing bebop with me. I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember that. Some of you are. And Marilyn complimented me on my socks rolled down around my ankles. Now that was the fashion statement of the time. This was the 50s, remember? So I know that Uncle Bill loved the ocean and he loved sailing. In 1998, he wanted to join the Peace Corps, and they said he was too old, so he decided to continue, and he went to Zimbabwe, where he met Jimmy Carter. And he was a retired engineer at that time. He participated in housing the people of Zimbabwe. He had mixed experiences there. Some of them were welcoming, some were great, and some were frustrating. But in the end, all was good. He traveled to various places. He saw beautiful countryside, and he learned about the culture of Zimbabwe. He was my best man at my wedding to Jim. I called him on his 99th birthday, and the first thing he said to me was, "Oh, I'm so lucky." And I guess those words will always stay with me. I mean, that was Uncle Bill. He lived a full, rich, and complete life. Uncle Bill was my hero. He would be missed by all those people whose lives he touched. Thank you.
I didn't eat it, so that was a success. Grandpa really loved scholarship. I think maybe more than possibly anything. he encouraged us to keep learning. And so this morning, when we were putting things out, we found the speech that he had written for his high school graduation. And I think that's a pretty great way to reflect on the way that even over 80 years since he graduated, a lot of these things that he writes about are what he was telling us. So I'm going to read a couple little pieces of it, and then I'm going to close it with just the little poem that he read at the end, a part of that. Okay. As we enter the outside world, we find ourselves at the crossroads. One way points to the destruction of culture and civilization toward the end of all that we hold sacred. The other road leads to a new, a richer, a better life by the right development of our accumulated knowledge. We believe the hope of the future lies in humanity's ability to keep pace with its knowledge. Science and medicine fight relentlessly day and night to combat the evils of sickness and disease, to lengthen life, making it richer and finer thing. Chemistry and engineering work side by side to create new abundance, to conserve resources, to make everyone's way of life happier. Transportation and communication have knit this world closer together. The airplane, the radio, the telegraph have helped to span time and distance. They are marvelous things, these modern miracles of scientific development. Let us help mankind keep peace. Let us know unselfishness and generosity, kindness and thoughtfulness. Let us know peace and development. And as we know these things, let us practice them in conjunction with all of the great scientific developments that we have at hand. Let us use our science, let us use our medical development, let us use our engineering abilities, let us use all our accumulated knowledge to make the way of life better for all people. We realize and recognize the futility of today's struggles, but we look to the future with hope and optimism always. You to the left and I to the right, for the ways of man must sever. And it well may be for a day and a night, or it well may be forever. But whether we meet or whether we part, crying with contacts makes it hard to read. But whether we meet or whether we part, for our ways are past our knowing, a pledge from the heart to its fellow heart on the way we all are going. Here's luck, for we know not where we are going.
Thanks to all for those beautiful sharings. As we come close to the end of this formal time of remembering Bill, we consider these words of Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, "Nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm." And Bill, of course, as we already know, was a man with enthusiasm for life. So as we watch these images lovingly compiled by his family, let us allow ourselves to be infected with this enthusiasm so that we might recommit to something he loved in his memory. our thanks to Scott for all the music in this service. Following these words, the family is going to share a special sung blessing, and then they will lead us to the Borton Hall, where they invite you to join them for a reception and sharing of more memories. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm." And as we know, this was definitely Bill's hallmark, as I said. The author Terry Pratchett, though, wrote, "No one is actually dead until the ripples that they cause in the world die away." And in this sense, the form of immortality that would have been the one that Bill cared about the most will continue to ripple out like the waves on the ocean that he loved, for he has touched so many, and so many have been touched by him. So let the end of this formal time of remembering Bill Steenberg be the beginning of continuing to celebrate through our lives his invincible spirit.
We'll sing our grace, but I'm going to let my cousin lead because my cousin's the only one of us that's not tone deaf.
Truer words were never spoken. So if you want to get up and join the circle. This is our tradition that we do after every single meal. It's a little song that we sing. And if any of you are as old as I am and remember the Johnny Appleseed song, it's the tune of that. So my goal here today in honor of Uncle Bill is to see if we can at least start out on the same pitch. That has never happened before. So, Scott, if you would be kind enough to hit an A below middle C, and then a D. Okay, those are the first two notes. Would you do that again? Okay, ready? Here we go. The Lord is good to me, and so I thank the Lord for giving me the things I need, the sun, the rain, and the apple seed. The Lord is good to me. Name of the Lord. Amen. Pass the love around. Hooray! All right. That was great. That was the best ever.
Thank you so much, and yes, that song is usually followed by a cheers with glasses raised. So thank you, and here's this.